Blue Jays fans, and welcome to episode 336 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by jaysfromthecouch.com. It is our Blue Jays trade deadline special. The deadline has officially passed. We may hear some things trickling in the next few minutes here, but it is our entire episode dedicated to the Major League Baseball trade deadline. We've got a lot going on, lots to dive into, and I'm your host as always, Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Like I said, a great episode for you. Lots to talk about. Some some deals, some potential deals, some deals that didn't work out, all of it. We've got it all here in a great episode. But before we dive into that, I want to take a second to remind you to join our Blue Jays Talk for All Facebook group. For everybody, literally Blue Jays Talk for All. We love the different voices, the different opinions, and the ways of thinking that everybody brings to our Toronto Blue Jays, and we encourage you to share them there. So look us up on Facebook, the Jays from the Couch, Blue Jays Talk for All group. As well, we are still continuing our fight against ALS, and you can help us out with that. You can make a charitable tax-deductible donation at support.alsevents.ca/Jays from the Couch. Any amount is accepted. We would really appreciate it. $5, $50, $100, doesn't matter. Whatever you can spare would greatly help us out in meeting our goal. As well, you can purchase some really neat Jays from the Couch swag. We've got t-shirts, Jays from the Couch radio, the On Fact Circle, Sunny Side of the Dome, all kinds of different merchandise at our Redbubble shop. The link is on the side of our Jays from the Couch main page, and 100% of the profits go directly to the ALS Society of Canada. We're not making any money off this. We're just trying to get a little fundraiser going and trying to fight this horrible disease. So please consider helping us out. All right, like I said, great episode for you. We're going to dive into the Major League Baseball trade deadline. We put off our show from last night to tonight, so thank you for tuning in on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We really do appreciate it. Makes us feel just special. Don't forget, you can send in your comments and questions and all of that stuff too. We'll put them up here on the screen, and you can be part of the show as well. To help me get through this trade deadline and make sense of it, first of all, the host of the On Fact Circle, Steve Feck. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Shaun. We actually have things to talk about at the trade deadline. Imagine that.
Imagine. And to help us out, host of the Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, it's the one and only Karen Suter. Good evening, Karen.
Good evening, Shaun. Good evening, Steve.
We've got a lot to kick off, to talk about. Obviously, Major League Baseball just went through their trade deadline, the only trade deadline. There used to be two, now there's only one, and it was exciting. I was refreshing my phone all day, every day. Had to recharge my phone a couple of times. My eyes are killing me, but that's deadline day at Major League Baseball, and I wouldn't have it any other way because I love it. But first, to lead off our show, if you're new to us, we do a segment at the beginning called the MLB Minute. Simply the MLB Minute. We each take one topic from around Major League Baseball and wax poetic, if you will, for an entire 60 seconds. It goes by fast. Some of us are better at sticking to that 1 minute than others. I'm horrible at it, but we always give it a go. So this week we thought we would look around the Major League Baseball trade deadline and choose one topic, either a trade or a team or whatever have you, that stands out in this Major League Baseball deadline period. So, Steve, we'll start with you.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure we had another plan, but
yeah, no, it's okay. Hey, I'm a professional. I can roll with. I can do it. I can roll with the punches.
See, and I'm not, so I make other people roll with things. That's how it works around here. All right, Steve, your 1 minute begins now.
I was going to pick the Randall Grichuk to the Angels trade just because that's just how I am, and I like to tick off people that hate Randall Grichuk. But I really want to focus on an old-fashioned baseball trade. And those of you watching on the YouTube channel, you can tell that I'm old, so therefore old-fashioned baseball trade is perfect. The Cleveland Guardians traded a controllable starting pitching, Adam Savali, to the Rays for like an uber hitting prospect. Manzardo can smash the ball. He's a 60 grade hitter. He's going to develop power. He's a 50 grade power guy. And Savali's controllable. Both of these guys are controllable. They fill specific needs that both teams needed. Rays needed a starting pitcher. Guardians need somebody to hit other than Jose Ramirez. So it was a perfect baseball trade. It's the ones that you walk away saying, well, what's going on? I don't understand. You don't have to understand it. The two GMs that executed the trade made it perfect. So that is my favorite MLB deadline trade today.
Perfect timing. See? Professional. All right, I'm gonna take second the 2-hole here, and I will begin now. So I've taken a little bit of a different approach here. I just want to reach out to the fan bases for a minute here, just to talk one-on-one, fan to fan. First of all, the fans of the Anaheim Angels, they are doing their best to try and keep Shohei Ohtani in town. And I feel bad for you because, wow, the trade deadline deals of Randall Grichuk, CJ Cron, Lucas Giolito, and Ronaldo Lopez. Good luck to you. Stay strong, Angels fans. But as bad as I feel for you, I feel even worse for fans of the New York Mets. What a friggin' roller coaster that fan base is going through right now. They've got splurging, throwing money all around. One offseason, not even 6 months later or whatever it is, we're here talking about them having a fire sale and sending off this person, that person, spending almost $40 million just for a prospect. Steve Cohen says, it's sunk money, whatever, who cares? Oh man. So now they'll be competing in a couple of years instead of this year. Stay strong, folks.
Just a real quick tidbit on your thing there, Shaun. The New York Mets will actually surpass the first level of the luxury tax just in money that they're paying for players that are no longer there. That they've traded at this deadline. They're going to still surpass the luxury tax just with that money.
This is what I'm saying. This is what poor Mets fans. Anyway, Karen, your 1 minute begins now.
Yeah, so as a Toronto Blue Jays fan, I have to say how excited I am that the Blue Jays traded for Jordan Hicks. I really wanted a lights out bullpen. I wanted it to be that it almost doesn't matter who you bring in because they're all really great. And they went out and got, as Jeff Passan, I believe, said, probably the best relief pitcher available on this year's trade market. So I mean, they already had a pretty good bullpen, but they had a few soft spots, and this makes them just that much stronger. It should give Jordan Romano as much time as he needs to get better and come back from the injured list. And I'm so excited. I can't wait to see them move forward. And go Jays.
Look at that. And time to spare, even. Time to spare.
Woo.
Look at that. That's okay.
Let's give Karen the chance to say the phrase she's been wanting to say all season. You know what that is, Karen?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Go Blue
Blue
Jays.
Jays have designated Matt White.
Oh, Mitch White for assignment.
I mean, Mitch White for assignment. Yes. I mean, you've been waiting to say that. You've been chomping at the bit to say that. You've been wanting it to happen, and it happened.
Yeah, that happened when they traded for Hicks. I mean, I feel bad for White. Everyone says he's a great guy, and he had some good stats. Like, trading for him a year ago made sense. He had some good stats with the Dodgers, and it's really sad that nothing worked out for him with the Blue Jays, but it wasn't working, and he wasn't getting anybody out. And in a year when they're trying to win now, you can't keep him on the roster. It doesn't work.
I think that's just it, right? Like in another year on another team, perhaps Mitch White gets a longer leash, right? But this is the nature of a team that's built to win right now, is there's not enough space, if you will, not enough time, not enough roster spots for somebody to find their way.
Figure it out, yeah.
Exactly. All right, so let's dive into this trade deadline. I don't think we really should, but we can still count it. First of all, the addition of Genesis Cabrera in the bullpen has looked pretty good, in his, I guess, start to a career in Blue Jays land. So that was the first move to help round out the bullpen. But really, when we're talking about deadline deals, let's first of all talk about this deal for Jordan Hicks. I think is probably the big one that we were all kind of waiting to see how they would address. Would they aim as high as Jordan Hicks, and would they get a Jordan Hicks-esque reliever? So Steve, I'm going to start with you. First of all, Jordan Hicks, 104 miles an hour, hitting triple digits, not only with his four-seam fastball, but his sinker as well. How do you see that fitting into this Blue Jays bullpen? All things being equal, let's assume that Jordan Romano is healthy and all of that stuff. Where do you see him fitting in there?
Francis?
Well, I think it just makes perfect sense. Does Karen have some breaking news here?
Yeah, no. So sorry, Ron's just talking to me from off. So I was trying to figure out how they would get Ryu back onto the roster because it wasn't announced. So Bowden Francis has been optioned back down, and Otto Lopez has been moved to the 60-day IL, unfortunately for him. So
yikes, that's not good.
Yeah, right. I guess that makes the DeYoung trade even bigger. But I mean, going back to Hicks, he's the guy that hasn't always pitched the ninth inning in that St. Louis bullpen. I mean, he has had some inconsistencies through his career. A lot of them are injury related. He had Tommy John, and they had some other complications coming back from the surgeries. So I don't think it's a matter that he's going to be out of place or he's going to pout and say, well, I want to be the closer. I think he's just happy to be out of St. Louis. He took a lot of heat in the St. Louis media and with the fan base because of his inconsistency. So I think for him, it's a change of scenery kind of deal. I don't think yet that he's going to have to hear any chirping about the cost of what was given up. But in essence, because of the situation, I don't care if they would have traded everybody on the 40-man roster that's not on the major league roster to get Jordan Hicks. They needed to bring in a leverage reliever while Romano's out. So good on the front office getting it done.
Right, and I think that's the key there, right? Like, there's no necessarily any pressure to kind of step into the Jordan Romano role to be the new closer while he's out. It's just another really, really electric arm to throw out there in any situation that's needed, whether Romano's injured or not, right? So, Karen, when you heard the deal was official and all of that stuff, what was your first thoughts? Because I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, Jordan Hicks was the guy you wanted.
He was number one on my wish list. So they went from Jays on the weekend, won the first two games, lost the game on Sunday, and I was feeling kind of blah about that. And then I heard the news about the Hicks trade, and I went from happy, from not so happy to quite happy. And yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about their prospects moving forward for the rest of this season and in the postseason. Although, as they say that, Shai Davidi has tweeted, Blue Jays are done for the day, source tells me, and Ben Nicholson Smith. So, I mean, they made a few good deals, but I think a lot of us were hoping that they would augment that with more of an impact bat, and guess they didn't do it. So
yeah, let's save that one. We're gonna circle back and talk about that bat for sure, because we were all waiting to see who it was going to be. But Steve, so when you look at the Jordan Hicks thing, one of the things, because in the few days leading up to that, a lot of questions that I was getting was, who are they going to get? What are they going to do? Blah blah blah. And I'm like, bullpen is the priority. Right. And then somebody asked me, well, what about Hicks from St. Louis? And I said, well, yeah, that would be great. One of my concerns, Steve, is that history with injuries. I mean, we know that in Major League Baseball, the way a pitcher throws the ball is counterintuitive to how the human body is supposed to work. Right. The harder you do that, the more aggressively you do that, the more susceptible you are to getting hurt. So, Steve, on a I don't know, on a scale of of 1 to 10, or however you want to phrase it, how concerned are you with the injury history of Jordan Hicks?
I'm really not, because the Tommy John surgery is now a couple seasons off. He did make adjustments to his delivery. He already has a very deceptive delivery anyway, but he made those changes, and I think that's why he really struggled at times, especially in 2022. I think he wasn't, sort of like we're seeing with Manoah, he wasn't finding that consistent release point. But eventually it figured out. He had a bad April, but he's been terrific since then, for a bad Cardinals team. So I don't really worry about the injury. I mean, if you're acquiring a guy that's already on the IL for a Tommy John or some kind of serious arm injury, let's say everybody's media darling Chad Green, that worries me, because we have no idea what's going to go happen. But I mean, he's now his third season back from that surgery, so he's still throwing as hard as he ever has. His velocity has certainly ticked up a little bit this season compared to what it was last year. It doesn't work. I mean, any pitcher is going to potentially get hurt with every pitch that he throws. So I'm not really, since he has been healthy, I'm not really concerned about it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, really, it's a few months, right? Just get through a few months, and then away he goes off to free agency, and if he's hurt, he's hurt, right? You got to kind of, that's literally the definition of going for it, right? It's, you take on that risk, and whether I have to think that the Blue Jays at this point, where they are with their the state of their organization, and heading toward that championship and win now mode, you see the medical records, you look at that stuff, and you'd make your decision. And obviously they made their decision, so they felt comfortable enough to bring him in as well. Karen, I wanted to ask you your thoughts on the package that was given up in Kloffenstein and Robersi. It seems, on the surface, it seems a little high. For some people may feel that you're getting a bullpen arm and you're giving up two prospects, two pitching prospects, first of all. So Karen, when you saw the return, were you happy with it? Were you a little about it, or what were your thoughts there?
Oh, honestly, I was totally fine with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, like those two guys, they both look like they have some talent. They're certainly not helping a major league team this year. What are they going to be in the future? Well, that's the thing. Nobody really knows. I mean, even with highly ranked prospects, sometimes it takes them quite a while to have any kind of success, and sometimes they never do. So, like I said, I wanted the Blue Jays to get immediate help, and they got immediate help. And they didn't have to give up Tiedemann or Brandon Barriera or Elvis or even Addison Barger. I mean, they gave up the two that they gave up. So I wish them all the best. And if it ends up being a slight overpay in the long run, I'm not bothered, because this is giving the Blue Jays a chance right now.
Right. It's the cost of doing business at this point, right? And I think I read a tweet, and I wish I could find it now. I think I read a tweet today that said something like 1 in 5 of the prospect names you hear today will actually make it to the big leagues. And a 20% success rate versus somebody who is going to throw 100 out of your bullpen tomorrow. Like that, to me, that's kind of a no-brainer given the situation that they're in. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, and that's when you say 1 out of 5 make it to the major leagues, that doesn't mean they have a long, successful career. That just means that they get the call up and presumably play in a minimum of 1 game. And some of those guys will be stars, and some of them will be everyday non-star players, and some of them might be fringe players that never really catch on. So,
Right, and that's exactly it. And I'll say it again. I'm pretty sure I said this in our last episode, but prospects are there to be dealt. They're there to feed your current major league team. However, helping your major league team doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play for you. So now, Steve, when you look at that Jordan Hicks, okay, so we've got Jordan Hicks coming to Toronto. They decide that they're going to make him feel welcome and go with red uniforms, and it turned out rather horribly, I might add. Let's make him feel comfortable. Red uniforms. We never win in those, but hey, let's try the red uniforms. Well, actually, Steve, it turns out that the red uniforms may have been a little bit of a harbinger of I don't know. I'm not going to blame the uniforms for what happened to Bo Bichette. All right, I'm not going to go that far. However, Bo Bichette in the red uniform, rounds first base. Yeah, those ugly red ones right there. Yep. Rounds first base, stops, and for lack of a better word, stops and pops. Right, his knee. He grabbed at his knee. He was limping off the field. So then, Steve, in your opinion, in that moment, like, of course, now we know what has happened, but in that moment, in your mind, does the Toronto Blue Jays trade deadline take a turn? Does it kind of get pushed forward? How does it impact, in your mind, in that moment? How did it impact what they were about to do over the next 24 hours?
Well, I think it impacted it dramatically. Depending on who you're listening to, the various chatter and noise that's out there at this time, DeYoung was already on the Blue Jays' radar as far as being that right-handed bat that they're always talking about that they need. He's got a little bit of pop. I don't know where the heck he would have played, if Bo was healthy. But I mean, apparently he was part of the mix, and I think. Didn't our Bob Ritchie also include him as a target, as a potential target in one of his articles? So good on Bob for pointing that out. But for me, the moment really was when they did actually acquire DeYoung, because I think it's now showing that the Blue Jays front office has a totally different modus operandi. And I think that has a lot to do with the presence of James Click, the vice president in charge of baseball strategy / general manager of the Toronto Blue Jays. I think that makes a big difference. And I think that Ross is missing that major league experienced GM, like he had Sherrington all those years. Now he's got Click there. I think that gives him a sounding board to say, I really don't want to do this because this piece, I really like this piece and things like that. And then it's sort of almost like, come on, Ross, wake up. We need to make a fit. I think it gives him that confidence to make those moves that he's not really very comfortable with. Ross Atkins is an off-season GM. As an in-season GM, I still have, as my hashtag says on the screen, fire Atkins anyway. But, as a postseason spending daddy's money kind of GM, he's been very effective. But I think having the presence of Click has made a huge difference in how the Blue Jays would have attacked a situation like that. Another reaction I had was, if they trade for DeYoung or a middle infielder, Bo has a much more serious injury than they're reporting that he has. That was the thing that I'm like, that just tells you right there, okay, Bo is really hurt. He may have to have surgery if they go up and pick up a middle infielder. And it turns out they just had the confidence. They didn't think the return was that bad, so they made the deal.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you don't see Ross Atkins do too often, and it's one of those deals for in the moment, right? Like the Jordan Hicks as well, the DeYoung as well. It's that this is what we need right now. And that there is no other kind of thought or analytics to put into that. We need this right now. Right. And Bob is watching here on YouTube. Do any of you understand Bichette's injury? An MRI showed inflammation, and that's it. Very vague description. I would agree. If we had heard that, especially way before the trade deadline, we would have heard that it's just inflammation and, he's day to day or whatever. It would feel more vague. But I think that, that in all honesty, it didn't look that bad. It didn't look devastating, watching it multiple times. And as somebody who rounding a base is potentially life threatening, I can say, like those those injuries, they happen, aches and pains and bumps and bruises and stuff like that. It is odd. What was odd about it is that it wasn't anything clear to have caused it, and that was where my concern lied. So the fact that, do I understand his injury? Well, given that I have just as much information about it as you do, Bob, I would say, he tweaked it. He, tried to stop it. His knee didn't like how he tried to stop, and in a few days maybe that'll be that. He's young and healthy and far more fit than I am. And as Dulcimeris says, Bo won't be out for very long, which is good news. And maybe that's just it. Maybe that is just the story there. Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. That was just me with my fingers crossed.
Oh, fingers crossed. Okay.
Oh,
your turn, Steve. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, as a person that's had multiple knee surgeries, nothing major, thank God. But I mean, I've had multiple soft tissue issues in my knee. If you have a trauma, and that could be whether it be from being, let's say, hit on a pitch directly on a knee, or it buckles and nothing tears in the cartilage or any of the soft tissue, but it's still, it's a bump. That is where swelling, whether it be fluid related or other kind of swelling and inflammation, will happen. So that is an injury where there's no tears or anything that potentially would cause another type of trauma. Mm-hmm. So if that, I don't know if that answers, Bob's question, because without, again, I'm not a doctor unless you include which doctor, but I can only go from personal experience. You can have inflammation without having any true structural damage to a joint.
Right. Absolutely. And as Mark watching on YouTube as well, Bo's going to be okay. No structural damage day to day. Should be back in a week or so. DeYoung can cover. And I think that's really, if you're looking at possible outcomes for Bo Bichette's injury, I think that is the best possible outcome, other than there's nothing wrong with him and everything's fine. He's doing a jig right now. You know what I mean? Like, that's the best possible outcome and the best possible news that we could have got. Okay, so now we have DeYoung coming into right now filling that immediate need of playing shortstop. So Karen, in your mind, I want to ask you, kind of put you on the hot seat a little bit. Let's say Bo Bichette comes back in a week. He misses a series, let's say. Something like that. Now you've got Bo Bichette and Paul DeYoung. How does that shape your infield in your mind, Karen? What does that do? Does one of them, they both can't play short, right? So something's got to give here. What do you think?
Yeah. My goodness, I don't even know where to start with that. Yeah, because I think, I looked at DeYoung's stats a little bit. I read up a little bit about him. So apparently he's a very, very good defender. I'm not sure, even how many games he's played. I mean, has he been an everyday player, a platoon player? How has he been used? Because are you just checking all pause?
I am. I'm pulling him up here. Okay. So, Steve, what are your thoughts as far as the playing time? How does that shake out in your mind while I'm pulling up the numbers here?
Well, again, I think DeYoung he was signed to a long extension by the Cardinals because he was producing as an everyday player. And then the year after he signed the extension, he suddenly kind of went south. He spent time, extended time in the minors. He is a good defender on both sides of second base, whether he's a second baseman or a shortstop. So you can use him there. You can slide Whit Merrifield into the outfield. I know he played third base in the minors before he came up, but I don't know how recent. I didn't really look at his minor league time most recently where he can go play third. But I mean, DeYoung, he has enough major league time, that you can call him a veteran. So even if you're bringing him off the bench, it's another flexibility point where, okay, you bring DeYoung in, let's say you pinch hit for somebody, let's say you pinch hit for Espinal, and then you bring in DeYoung. He's going to handle his defense either way. He's a better bat. You can slide Whit Merrifield, somewhere depending on what the lineup thing is. I think it gives a lot of flexibility to this lineup that might not necessarily exist if you had just Espinal. Or, well, Otto Lopez is hurt, or if you bring up an Ernie Clement, I'm not sure you have the same kind of offensive flexibility as you do with having Paul DeYoung in the lineup.
Right. So just looking here quickly, second base, he played one game there last season, and then has 23 games in total and none since 2017 at second. Shortstop has been his whole career. And I'm looking at third base, hasn't played there since 2017 when he played 3 games, but the year before, he has almost 1,000 innings at third base.
Right. So how many games did he play so far in 2023?
All of them at shortstop and 81 games.
Okay, 81. So he's pretty much been an everyday player.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a tough one because you're not taking Bo Bichette's job away from him if he's healthy. He's been like the best player on the Blue Jays. He's the one that really deserved to be an all-star. And but DeYoung is the better defender. Does Bo start? Yeah. Does DeYoung come in defensively later on? But then I don't know. There's just so many ins and outs. It sounds like you can slide him over to second base. I think Whit Merrifield has been one of their best hitters of late. I think he has to play every day, whether that's at second base or in left field. So if you've got a tough left-hander starting, then by all means Varsho can sit and Merrifield can play left, and then you've got both shortstop and second open. And I'm really not sure how all of that works out. And as much as I like both Espinal and Biggio, I'm not sure that there's room for all 4 of them on your roster.
Yeah, and that's where when we talk about, I was going to get into those two when we talk about the moves that they didn't make. But you're right. Let's do that right now. If you're looking around the roster, there's not a lot of space here, right? So now we have. Sorry, I'll get to it after. But now we have a situation where you have too many infielders, right? You've got Biggio and Espinal now, and you got to find playing time for them, maybe in the outfield somewhere too. So the immediate thought was, Steve, one of them is going to be included in a trade to somewhere. Whether it's to Seattle, where we heard Teoscar Hernandez was a possibility and the Jays were in on that, or whether it's Tommy Pham from the Mets, who ended up going to Arizona. So, Steve, I guess now that when you look at the moves they didn't make, it would have been a chance, first of all, to clean up the roster a little bit, right? To make playing time a little more attainable for some people. But now, Steve, the question becomes, what do you do with those two now? With Espinal and Biggio, who both have been struggling with the bat basically all season. What do you do, Steve?
Well, they both have options remaining, correct? Do they not have
I think so.
options? Okay, so I think that's the obvious answer. You send one of them to Buffalo. My guess is it's Biggio. As much as that breaks my heart, I'm guessing you have to send Biggio out. We're always talking and worrying about depth, major league ready depth. If you've got a Biggio or Espinal sitting at AAA, you can't. That's got to make you feel good, because what if another unexpected injury comes up? Not that we're jinxing anything, so I'm not going to mention any players, but let's say somebody gets hurt that you didn't expect. Now you've got somebody that at least has major league experience that you're familiar with. You know what they can and can't do, so it's not that big of a deal. It's something at this stage. you can't worry about, what does it do to the confidence of those guys? Espinal and Biggio have both had the opportunities for the last, Biggio for the last 2 years, but Espinal this year to reestablish themselves. And they just haven't really done it with the bat. I don't think it's affected them defensively, but with the bat, and that's something that I think the Blue Jays are trying to put more emphasis on, because ultimately they're going to have to outscore teams like the Orioles and the Rays in the division. Even the Red Sox. I'm not sure the Yankees will ever hit again, but it's something that these are the decisions that championship teams have to make all the time.
Right. Okay, so if we're looking at the trade deadline has come and gone with DeYoung and Hicks and Genesis Cabrera, all now Toronto Blue Jays. Who's the one they didn't get? Karen, in your mind, who is the one target? And I think I know the answer, but who is the one target that you really would have liked them to see, like to have seen them bring in?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they've done lots with their pitching and good upgrades with their defense. An upgrade to the offense really would have been nice. And the last couple of days, one name that was thrown around in connection with the Blue Jays was Teoscar Hernandez, which surprised the heck out of me, because after they traded him out of town, I really never thought that they would have any serious interest in him again. But I mean, when I hear people who I consider credible, like Shai Davidi, say that, like, indicate that there was some interest on the Blue Jays' part, I started to wonder, might this actually happen? And I mean, they've had trouble hitting left-handed pitchers. Hernandez has hit left-handed pitching well this season. His overall hitting numbers are down. They're not what we came to be accustomed to when he was a Silver Slugger with us. But who knows? Maybe coming back to where things are familiar here could have been a resurgence for him. Now we'll never know. And yeah, I don't know why they didn't do. I am happy with the moves that they made. I don't know why they didn't do a little more in acquiring a potentially impact bat. And it would have been great if it had been Hernandez, but if they'd gotten somebody else whose numbers were equally promising, I wouldn't be as disappointed. But I'm not sure what happened.
Right.
Or what didn't happen.
And that's just it. Yeah. So, and Steve, I'll throw it to you, and I'll say, like, you're talking about a division that's tough, but really, aside from Baltimore landing Jack Flaherty, the Blue Jays had done the most. So you have a division where really nobody's kind of taking on that big go for it thing, that move, right? So why didn't, who's the one target, Steve, in your mind that would have been the over the top, pedal to the metal, kind of move in your mind?
See, I really wasn't looking at offense whatsoever. I figured if somebody stumbled into their grasp, great. There weren't that many impact bats on the market, so the asking price was overly inflated. So I'm sure that the interest in Teoscar was there. I just think that the price that could have been demanded was just too high. And I don't know that, as odd as it sounds, because they made the deal with Seattle, for Teoscar. I don't know that the fit was there that wouldn't really maybe have hurt the Jays somewhere else, or where the Mariners might have been shopping with that. I was looking at Kendall Graveman and Kenyon Middleton, who went to the Yankees in a last-minute deal. Middleton went from the White Sox to the Yankees for talk about a fan base that you need to feel bad for. The Chicago White Sox fan base, I think there needs to be a 24/7 suicide watch for anyone that has a White Sox hat or shirt or T-shirt or jersey, because I can't believe what they did at this deadline. I've been doing a lot of like almost hour by hour kind of live videos on different things. I cannot believe that the White Sox have just totally dismantled their team and really not got a whole lot back. But so those were the guys I was looking at. I mean, Jordan Hicks, I mean, that was great. I didn't expect Hicks coming here. I have to admit, I didn't think Hicks would come here because I just didn't think that they would give the type of prospects back to the Cardinals that Mozeliak has been requesting in some of the deals. But so I really wasn't disappointed from the offensive standpoint. You got to figure the odds eventually would be that that Chapman starts becoming more consistent. That, I mean, I know people are giving Vladdy all kind of crap. He's having a very good year, but they want him to be MVP Vladdy every single game. But you can't have a streak where he's just being unbelievable Vladdy. He's got to be MVP Vladdy. So I think that was all going to play out in the wash eventually. I was more happy that they made the adjustments for the injured players when they needed to do that. So for me, I don't think they failed to secure anything. They had to change their plan midstream to cover two holes created by injuries that nobody saw coming.
Right. So the reason I bring this up is because when you look at the Blue Jays on paper, they're a very, very good team. But the one area where they have been up and down and they have been inconsistent, and really, when you talk about the pressure on Vladdy, it comes from the fact that the Blue Jays offense has been inconsistent. We have several players who are not living up to the potential that, like, I hate to bring it back to him, but Dalton Varsho's heard his name enough already over the first few months of the season. Like, you feel bad for the guy, but if you want to talk about not producing, Dalton Varsho is top of that list. The offense as a whole, they subtracted Teoscar and Lourdes to get pitching and defense and all of that stuff, and yay, it worked. But they thought their offense was strong enough to withstand that subtraction. And here we are now in the very next offseason or the very next trade deadline, talking about the fact that there's something missing. They subtracted something and they haven't been able to replace it, right? So that's the concern that I have. The Blue Jays are a good team on paper, no problem whatsoever. They're going to be a playoff team and all of that stuff. However, the offense has been the source of, I don't want to say ineptitude because that's a little bit harsh, but it has been a disappointment. So, and that's why I was like, okay, well, let's get something, maybe there's a little spark there to, like just to kind of give these guys a kick in the pants or light the fire, or whatever cliche term you want to use. Something has to happen, right? Because what's happening now is Ross Atkins has been sitting back waiting. John Schneider is saying the same thing, that these guys are too good and then they just got to turn it around and blah, blah, blah. But, oh my God, come on. How long are we going to wait? And that's so when we're looking at the trade deadline, that's your chance to add something, especially in a division that's very difficult. You can't even beat the Red Sox. You can't beat the Orioles. So you got to do something. You have to have some kind of interjection here. They didn't do it. So now here they are. And maybe this sends a great message to your players already in-house. We believe in you. You guys are good. You just got to play the best you can play, whatever. Maybe that's the message they're trying to send, and maybe it works. But, oh my gosh, Karen, I'm looking at this offense right now, and Paul DeJong is the biggest addition to that. Are you concerned, Karen, that will this be the big mistake, I guess, in not picking up that big bat?
It certainly could be. And I can't help but, at some point I should stop tooting this horn, but in the off season, as hard as it was for me personally to say goodbye to Gurriel and to Hernandez, I tried, like, I put on the most rational side of me that I could find. And I said, honestly, I am afraid that they have given away too much of their offense. I understand the need to upgrade pitching and defense, but they did it at a cost. And the thing about baseball games is you need to be able to score runs if you're going to win. You have to be able to prevent runs from your opponent, but you also have to score some runs. And lo and behold, a lot of the time this season, they have struggled to score runs, even when they've won games. A lot of the games that they've won, I don't know how many times I've said, yeah, good pitching, good defense, just enough timely hitting. That they haven't had a lot of decisive wins. And that's what, if you really want to round out this team, I was really hoping that one, for my heart, having Teoscar Hernandez back would have been awesome. And I still can't help but feel that maybe that could have done something for Vlad as well, to have his good buddy back on his team. But apparently it didn't happen. But again, if they, he's not the only guy in Major League Baseball who has ever hit a baseball, and I'm sure there are other guys that they could have gotten that who potentially could have added a spark to this offense. I think it could be a problem. I really hope it isn't, but
Right.
eh,
Steve, in your mind, first of all, there's going to be a two-part question here, and they're not necessarily related, but the first one is, do you think this is the big mistake for this year? And then the second part of that is, do you think that perhaps that big bat wasn't available because of more teams kind of being in the mix, more teams buying, sellers kind of it being a seller's market, able to pay that higher price kind of thing? Do you think that scared Atkins away, or were there too many teams involved, or do you just think that it wasn't a priority?
Oh, there's so many ways I could answer that question, but I'll get I'll get to the. I always say this, in the 4 years that I've been, in the 4 seasons that I've been working with all you guys here at Jays from the Couch. You can't wait to the trade deadline every single time to solve your problems. There were probably hitters that were out there that could have been had 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, that you could have then brought in. Maybe you might have been paying a different kind of prospect price for it, but you could have brought those bats in then, so you have an extra 4 or 6 weeks to see, was that the fix? And then if it wasn't, then you go and you make another addition. So that's the problem when you wait too long. Now, this was just one of those outlier years that there just weren't enough reliable bats that you could say this is going to make the difference. But I'm also going to throw out that in 2020, 2021, and 2022, the Blue Jays were bad with runners in scoring position. As far as situational hitting, runner scoring position, the difference this year is they're horrible with runners in scoring position in 2023, as opposed to just being bad. So I think it seems amplified. And quite honestly, I mean, I rarely stick up for Atkins saying, with basically anything. I mean, I want him fired because he keeps waiting till the trade deadline every year. But in this trade deadline, I don't know that I would have paid the price to bring in some of the bats that we were talking about. I mean, there was. I mean, I wish I would have known that Jake Berger was going to be put on the market by the White Sox, because he would have been great, because he plays second, he plays third. You can play him in the outfield. His former number 1 pick. He's a bad on base guy, but when he makes contact, he drives the ball over the fence. So I mean, it's what you could look at it now and say, oh well, Jake Berger was out there. I don't think anybody, other than maybe Rick Hahn's psychiatrist, when he was trying to get the medications balanced for him, what he was going to do at this deadline. I don't think anybody was thinking that Jake Berger was getting traded to the Marlins. Again, Marlins give up, a really great college pitching prospect, but I don't think anybody expected that. So you can always go back and look, oh, they could have got Jake Berger, or they could have got this guy. Quite honestly, Atkins, and again, I think having that other set of ears to bounce ideas off of, not just the same old Tony LaCava and the guys that have been there since they took over here in 2016. I think it really helped him to have James Clickner, who has been there under the gun when everybody's always screaming at Click, you need to add another bat, but the asking price was just too high as far as what the Astros felt that they could afford as far as being a sustainable winner. I think in this particular case, Atkins made the right decision to not overpay for a bat just for the sake to do that. Luckily, there was another dopey GM in John Mozeliak that was able to give Paul DeJong away for basically nothing. I mean, they didn't really give anything. They didn't give anything away. I mean, what was his name? Swanson, was he like 44 or something? And he's at high A. I don't think he's 44, but he's a little old for being at high A. So again, you didn't. He's projectable. John Mozeliak, he's projectable. That's great, but you got a Paul DeJong that solves part of your problem, at least in the short term,
right? For
giving away nothing. So I think that was the right deal for that.
The rare Atkins defense from Steve Feck. This is what a world we live in today. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say a big shock. I see it a little bit differently than Steve does here. I mean, when the Mariners traded for Hernandez in the offseason, all they had to give up was Eric Swanson and Adam Macko, and that was having a full year of his service, someone who at least has the hitting resume that Hernandez has, and there was every reason to think that he might have come close to those numbers again. Now, anybody who would have traded for him would have gotten 2 months of Hernandez in a down season. Like, I have to think that had he been traded, the prospect cost would have been reasonable.
Perhaps, yeah.
I would think that it's something the Jays could have done. It's either they chose not to for some reason, or the Mariners just said we want to keep him. I'm not quite sure why. I mean, they're not completely out of the wild card picture. They're, what are they, 4.5 back? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it was just a bad fit based on what the injuries that the Mariners have had offensively. I mean, they were going to have to get an offensive piece back, and I don't think the pieces that are major league ready really would fit that profile. I mean, pitching wise, the Blue Jays, I think, had pitchers to move, but I don't know that they have major league ready hitters that they were either willing to give up or that were ready.
Right.
To get a Teoscar back.
So before we move into our fake news segment, I'm going to ask each of you just and you get one sentence. That's all you get. One sentence. After the trade deadline has passed now, do the Toronto Blue Jays, have they done enough to win the division and or make a deep run in the postseason? Karen?
Win the division, no. Deep run, 50-50. If their pitching stays on fire.
Steve?
They did what they had to do. They're not winning the division. And I'll make this a compound sentence. They have to win a playoff series first. So if they do that, then I guess that they've done what they needed to do at the deadline.
Wow. I'm going to say if they were going to win the division, it won't be because of this trade deadline. That's not going to be the deciding factor. And will they make a deep run? I don't see it. I'm a little nervous. I'm again, Steve, with you. If they can win one series, that's better than last year. But the offense is too inconsistent right now. I would love to be proven wrong, but over the next couple of months, man, this is going to be tough. Which leads me to we will be having this conversation, and Matt Sweeby, you can tell he's a long-time listener and all of that stuff. First of all, he answered the question, no chance of the division, and they probably go out in the ALDS. And then he follows it up with, then Atkins gets fired. All I'm going to say, we will be talking about Ross Atkins as we get closer and closer to the end of the season, but I will say this will be the year that decision has to be addressed. So, all right, it is time for my favorite segment here at Jays from the Couch. For those of you who are new, it is our fake Blue Jays news segment where we come up with some news items and we completely BS them for entertainment purposes only. They are just that, fake Blue Jays news. It's a lot of fun, and if you don't agree, then that says more about you than our fake news. All right. So, Jays from the Couch proudly presents fake Blue Jays news. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Shaun. MLB owners announced last week that they've extended Commissioner Right-Said Manfred's contract through the year 2029. Famed evangelist Franklin Graham, son of the late clinically insane Billy Graham, declared during a sermon shared on social media that the year 2029 will be the end times. The book of Revelations foretold a series of antichrists would precede the day of judgment, warned Reverend Graham. The beast has been given free rein over the Church of Baseball. When questioned how he would be certain that Manfred's extension was a sign of the apocalypse, Graham told reporters, "You don't need to be a prophet to spot pure evil." Blue Jay fans have been applauding the acquisition of leverage reliever Jordan Hicks from the St. Louis Cardinals, but it was a trade that almost didn't happen due to a procedural error committed by general manager Ross Atkins. You'll like this, Mets Weeby. Keep listening. Turns out Atkins was in the middle of a previously scheduled fantasy football draft when the details of the Hicks trade was being finalized. Distracted momentarily by his next pick, Atkins phoned in the trade not to MLB offices, but to the NFL offices, claiming to have acquired Vikings defensive back Jordan Hicks. Luckily for Atkins, the person answering the phone at the NFL offices was a diehard Blue Jays fan, gave the Toronto GM the right number for the MLB offices, and failed to log the trade with the NFL offices. So disaster was averted for the Blue Jays, but alas, not for Atkins, because his fantasy team ended up drafting no quarterbacks and 9 kickers because the report said that was the way to go. And I'll wrap it up with a weird human interest story I came across this week. The New York Post published the story of a Japanese man who spent $14,000 on a lifelike costume to transform himself into a collie. Now, that fulfilled a lifelong dream of being able to live his life as an animal. And that's a bargain, really, when you consider that Rogers Communication has been paying Ross Atkins millions of dollars to dress up as a baseball executive, pretending to live the life of an MLB general manager. And the Toronto fan base has been his fire hydrant. Oh, wait, there's one last breaking trade deadline bit of information. I guess it's kind of newsworthy. Ross Atkins has created a brand new X/Twitter account. The first tweet, #fire Feckless Wonder now. Over to you, Shaun.
Thank you, Steve. Jays from the Couch has learned that the Blue Jays were in discussions with the Angels about two-way phenom Shohei Ohtani before GM Perry Manassian took him off the market. Apparently, talks broke down for a number of reasons, and they were all from Toronto's side. Firstly, Vladdy raised serious objections. When asked for comment, Vladdy said, "Screw that guy. He owes me the 2021 MVP award." The second reason the deal never came to fruition is that every Jays player gets a Rogers phone, but ownership refused to cover the long-distance charges for Ohtani to be able to call his native Japan. And the final reason talks fell through is because Ross Atkins heard the ask, wanted to think about it, and then he got distracted by the St. Louis Cardinals. When asked about it, Atkins had this to say: "I think I'm in love." Cardinals GM Mike Grisham talked on the phone for hours and hours, and before we knew it, weeks had passed. It's magic when you find someone you connect with. And finally, Commissioner Rob Manfred has received a contract extension recently as the Major League Baseball owners voted to continue his tenure at the helm of Major League Baseball. Of course, this comes around the same time as reports of big attendance increases across the game are being reported. Jays from the Couch reached out to owners for comment, to no avail, of course. Instead, we simply received an email from the commissioner's office that contained a joint statement, and the email was very brief. It simply read, "Cha-ching." And that has been fake Blue Jays news. Oh, there is no shortage of Rob Manfred jokes ever. Like, we will never, ever, ever run out. All right, but we have run out of time here on the episode 336 of the Jays from the Couch Radio podcast. I want to say thank you to Karen and Steve for tuning in on a special evening to discuss all things Toronto Blue Jays and the trade deadline and all that stuff. It was great, so thank you both for taking your time. And I want to thank everybody for watching on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and for all your comments there. I didn't get to all of them, whether they were kind or they weren't. Thank you. We do appreciate the views and the comments and all of that stuff. Make sure you give us a like and a subscribe. And you know what? Look for the audio version anywhere you find quality podcasts. So for Karen, for Steve, for my buddy Ross Atkins, this is Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.